Well, hi again, everyone. Welcome to UnAnchored Boston. Great to have all of you with us this week. And of course, this week's episode is brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping and where. We're in New Hampshire, of course. And the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. I know George Gray is going to be excited about this week's guests, which will be introduced and presented by the one and only Bob Lobel. Take it away, Robert.
Steve Grogan is with us, number 14, played for the Patriots for 16 seasons. And when those of us go back, there was a quarterback before Tom Brady's, believe it or not. There was a quarterback here in New England. Although, Grogs, we were just talking about you're getting off a podcast with Irving Fryer. How many of these podcasts do you do? Every teammate have a podcast now?
I think that's the first podcast I've ever done. You're the second.
Well, that's good.
I only do them for certain people.
Yeah, anybody that asks. That's my motto. Steve, what was in your time here? Before I get to that question, it was Montana called Marino the greatest quarterback he's ever seen. And I just have to ask you how your reaction to that would be, and because you were in that era, and does Brady trump that?
I saw that same article, and I would tend to agree with Montana, although Brady was amazing winning Super Bowls. Montana only went to one, and they didn't win it. So, but he could throw the ball as good as anybody. And I think it's a close call between him and Brady.
That's an interesting answer. And I think you're probably right. I mean, it's a different era. The rules are significantly different for quarterbacks. Nobody can touch them now. You might have played 10 more years if the same rules were in today.
I don't know if they've been that long, but I probably could have got a couple more in. I understand why they're protecting the quarterbacks and wide receivers. Those are the guys that make all the money. And if they're not on the field, if they're sitting on the sidelines injured, it's not good for business. So they're taking care of these guys partly for a greed factor, but partly because it's good that they're protecting the players in general.
But it's, it's kind of I know it's a strange statement, trying to protect players in a sport that's not protectable. I mean, on one hand, it's like hockey. On one hand, you really like the fights. On one hand, you have to outlaw the fights. So it's like, how can you protect in a sport that's not able to be protectable? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I would agree with that. The game's headed toward flag football, basically. I don't think it'll ever quite get there, but people like to see physicality, and they're taking a lot of the physicality out of the game.
Steve, we want to bring back the snowplow game, and we had Nelly on a couple of weeks ago, and we asked Nelly if it was his idea because he got the game ball, and he said nope. He said, ask Steve Grogan. And I said, well, who was he? He goes, I'm not going to say anything. Ask Steve Grogan about the origin of the snowplow against the Miami Dolphins. So here you go.
So there was a timeout called, and I ran down the sidelines to wave the Henderson guy on the tractor. I wanted him to go down the line that we were on, and so the guys could get their blocks easier. He took it upon himself when he got out where the players started of swinging back and clearing a space off for John Smith to kick. Unbeknownst to everybody else, John was used to kicking from 7.5 yards deep. And Henderson had cleared a spot 6.5 yards deep. And for a lot of kickers, that would really, really bother them. And I think John kind of knew he just had to get the ball up in the air and get it through. But it could have been devastating if it hadn't been for John being able to kick from 6.5 instead of 7.5.
Lucky it didn't get blocked.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all new information. Everybody thought Ron Meyer was the one that told Henderson to go out on the field, but you wanted him not to make a spot for Smith, but to make a spot for the linemen to hold their blocks.
Well, Meyer was the one that told me to run down and tell him that. I just said, I waved him out and he took off. Ron Meyer never had a lot to do with what was going on the sidelines anyway. So that's a whole nother story.
No, that's a good. Well, tell us about Ron Meyer and about some of the other coaches you played for. Let's start with Meyer.
He came from SMU, where they a couple of years later got in a lot of trouble because of him. But our first practice in the spring when we had mini camp, he was standing over in the defensive huddle while we were running plays offensively against defense. And we took a break. Steve Nelson came walking over to me, and I looked at him and I said, "Oh, he must be a real defensive coach. He spent a lot of time with you guys." And he said, "Are you kidding me? He doesn't know anything about defense. He didn't say anything that made sense." So I thought, well, maybe he's a offensive coach. So we started back up again, and I threw a 5-yard out route, and the ball bounced in front of the receiver, whoever it was. And Meyer came in the huddle and looked at me. He goes, "You got to throw that higher." And so I kind of figured he didn't know much of anything. He was a great promotional kind of guy, great for college football, but I don't know. He wasn't my favorite.
Probably a pretty good car salesman.
Could have been. And what turned out to be a car salesman was Chuck Fairbanks. He was a great coach. We went to Colorado. Everybody knows that story, but he wound up owning car dealerships down in Arizona. So,
really? Was he your favorite coach of all time?
He and Raymond Berry are very close. Chuck gave me a chance. He let me do things like running the ball that most NFL coaches wouldn't have let their quarterbacks do. He designed plays for me to run the ball, and that bought me time to learn how to throw it and learn the passing game. Raymond Berry was, a former Hall of Fame player, and he gave me a lot of responsibility as a player, calling plays for myself and for the other quarterbacks. And he was a great guy, a wonderful person. And so the two of them had different personalities, but they were both great coaches.
That 1976 season, Steve, I don't know how they gave the MVP award to Burt Jones with the year you had. Did you feel like you were the most valuable player in the league that year?
I didn't worry about that at all. I just wanted to win games and do what I could to help our team win. I'm sure because I ran the ball so much, I wasn't the prototypical passing quarterback. Burt Jones could run a little bit, but he didn't run a lot. He threw the ball a lot. So, he got the award. I would have liked to have gone to the Pro Bowl, but that didn't work out either. So it was what it was.
Well, your own abilities in running probably cost you a couple of years because of all your knee problems and everything else. You can't go out there and expose yourself like you did. But I can understand why you enjoyed doing it, because it was another dimension that you were able to bring to the game.
I never considered myself a quarterback per se. I mean, I considered myself a football player. I was as big as a lot of the running backs. I had run the ball in college and knew that was a talent that I had. And, maybe it cost me a couple years. I don't think so, but I just wanted to play football. I just wanted to hit and be hit. And Nelly, you had him on. He probably said this to you, but he used to accuse me of throwing. He accused me and Bert Jones of throwing interceptions on purpose so we could run down and hit somebody. Now, I don't know about Bert, but I didn't do it on purpose.
I just got to throw this in there. You didn't mention Kansas State by name, but you mentioned college. And I know you're a Wildcat, Kansas State. And my father, I'll just say this because he lived in Topeka at the time. My father and mother lived in Topeka. And he could have been a KU fan, or he could have gone to K-State, but he was a big K-State fan. And he actually went to games. I couldn't believe he went to Manhattan to see you guys play. And don't ask me why he picked K-State, but he was a big K-State fan, and I'll just never forget that. And the fact that you came to K-State kind of gave me a connection to my late father. It was just kind of fascinating to me how that.
You never mentioned that to me, Bob, when we were.
I know, it just was one of those things. He was a Kansas State guy all the way, and I can remember going out there and visit him in Topeka, and I just I never asked him why. He just said he just liked it and liked the team and just enjoyed being part of it. That was pretty good.
Well, he could. He probably liked it because he could get a ticket anytime he wanted one. We didn't have too many people in the stands, so he was more than welcome.
Well, if you'd known that, Steve, all these years, you would have watched Channel 4 instead of Channel 5.
There you go.
I'll stop it, Lynch. Just stop it. Well, who was Raymond Berry? Why was he so popular? Because Nelson said the same thing, and I think forget this. I know the Super Bowl '86, and we can get to that when we get to it. But I also loved Raymond Berry. I really thought he was, he's a big difference from Parcells to certainly Belichick. I mean, talk about Berry versus Belichick. It was, opposites, just total opposites.
Yeah. Raymond, he had an ability to notice talent in certain people and bring that out of them. He was able to talk to the guys as a former player. I think it was easier for him to talk to the team. He gave all of us a lot of responsibility as far as what we were doing on the field, and he brought in a lot of great assistant coaches with him, and those guys helped with the success we had while he was there.
Well, he was just 86. We might as well get right to the Super Bowl against the Bears. And the fact that you threw the only touchdown pass for the Patriots that they had in that game. I mean, Tony Eason was a star, but Barry, I don't know. I think he favored you. I think that he would rather have played you than Tony. And because of your popularity around here, Easton became a villain. And you know that. It was like last year when I don't know if you're another story, Belichick put in whatever the backup, Bailey Zappi, and instead of Mac Jones, and the fans were cheering Zappi, and poor Jones was stuck out, could hear these cheers.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was like same for you and Tony Easton. You were the hero, he was the villain. through no fault of his own.
No, it was no fault of his own. How do I word this? I was coming off a broken leg. I had only dressed for the AFC Championship game. The other two playoff games I hadn't dressed. And if you remember the three playoff games, we won one on the road to get to the Super Bowl. We ran the ball heavily in those games, and that's why we won. Turnovers and running the football. I think Eason only threw 10 or 12 passes in each game. But I know why Raymond started him. He got us through the playoffs, and I was okay with that. I just wanted to get in. I tell the story about getting in Dante Scarnecchia's ear and volunteering to cover kickoffs or punts or block for an extra point. Because Tom Ramsey and I were the only two guys on the team that were not going to get on the field. And I had to get on the field some way or another to say I played in the Super Bowl. And about the middle of the second quarter, Eason was 0 for 4 and 4 sacks. And he was just not having a good day. And Raymond came over to me and he said, I'm thinking about making a quarterback change. What do you think? And I said, Coach, I'm ready to go, but I can't make that decision. And he said, warm up. And so that's when I started warming up and I went in the game. And I had visions of bringing us back, but the Chicago Bears defense was the best I ever saw and maybe the best ever in the game. So it was a rough afternoon. Actually, I tell people I threw 2 touchdown passes, one to Irving Fryer, and there was a tip ball to one of the defensive backs for the Bears and ran it back for a touchdown. So I really threw 2 touchdown passes.
Let me ask you this, Steve. As a quarterback, you step into the huddle. Every wide receiver can beat the guy that's covering him. Every offensive lineman can block the guy that's opposite him.
Yep.
And you sort of let it go in one ear and out the other. But when John Hannah spoke, if he ever spoke in that huddle, did you absolutely not question anything he ever said?
Absolutely. I learned from calling my own plays back under under Ron Earhart for 2 years. I learned there were certain people you listened to in the huddle, and there were certain people that you didn't listen to. You just kind of said, okay, we'll get to that, and then maybe throw them a bone later in the day. But when John Hannah, when I walk in the huddle and I say, we got 3rd and 3 and I want to run it, what can you guys give me for 3 yards? If Hannah spoke up and said, run this, then I ran that, and we normally got the 3 yards. He was a smart football player, a tough football player, and when an offensive lineman tells you they can do something, they're going to make it happen because they don't want to be embarrassed.
Was Hannah tougher? Okay, who was tougher, Hannah or Nelson? Who would you rather go to war with, Hannah or Nelson?
My goodness, that's a tough decision. I'd take both of them, I think. Hannah gets a little, he would get a little emotional at times. You know, we'd play the Cowboys and Randy White would be across from him. And John got so caught up sometimes in the battle between he and Randy White that he kind of forgot about other things. Nelly, on the other hand, is tough as nails and had a good head on his shoulders. And I would love, if I had to, go to war with him too. So I can't pick one of those two.
Brooks, what was it about the Orange Bowl? Like the Bruins had the Montreal Forum was their Orange Bowl, just a place you guys couldn't win for about 20 years until the AFC Championship game, which is the most important game you ever played in that Orange Bowl. What was it about going down there? You could beat them up here in the snow, you could beat them up here in the heat, but for some reason going down there, Did it ever get inside you guys' heads?
I think a little bit, not a lot. Just was one of those things that happens in sports. Certain teams can't beat other certain teams, and we couldn't beat Miami in Miami. I don't know that if there was a reason for that or not. I don't know it. I know the last few years we went down there, they had to bring dogs in to smell for explosives. So maybe that had something to do with the last few years. And then I do remember my rookie year when we were going down there, they made a big deal about it. Chuck Fairbanks made a big deal about it, not having won down there in 15 some years, or maybe not quite that many, but I think it did get in people's heads a little bit, but not a lot.
Steve, it was also without controversy, and I just go back to the strike year, which was an amazing set of circumstances for everybody. It's hard to even sit here today and talk about a league like the NFL going out on strike or players in a walkout and having teams come in, scabs basically come in and play games that counted. I mean, really think about it, Lynch. We back, it's hard to believe that actually happened, but it did, and you were right in the forefront of it. Can you re-describe a large segment of the population probably don't remember it, but it actually happened. And one of the most popular players in New England, Doug Flutie, walked across the picket lines and in essence played for the Patriots and became a scab in the process. And it's just, these are the things that I just ask myself, how did that all go down?
As football players, we were looking at the kind of money that the other leagues, baseball and basketball, were making, and we weren't even close to them. The pension plan was not good, and the leaders of the union, which were players and as well as the executives that ran the union, just decided we had to do something about it, and we took a vote and decided to go out on strike. The owners decided after a couple of weeks that they needed to play games, and they started signing some of the players that had been there. Some of the players had come from the Canadian Football League, like Doug. And there were guys that really resented those guys for walking across the picket line. I didn't want them to walk across the picket line, but I didn't hold a grudge. Some people had to do what was best for them, and I understood that. Billy Sullivan called me almost every night asking me to come back in, thinking that if I came back in, then a lot of guys would follow me. And I kept explaining to him that I just couldn't do that. I wouldn't have any credibility if I did that. And the day they finally let us come back as a team, the strike was over. We went single file into the front door of the stadium and down to the locker room.
I'll never forget you guys walking across the parking lot. That's a night I'll never forget.
And I broke ranks, and I walked over to Mr. Sullivan and I shook his hand and said, "I'm sorry it had to happen this way." And then I got back in line and walked down to the locker room, and the rest of us got ready for practice, and we moved on.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was. I want to go back to that '76 team. Have you ever been in an assembled group like that? You thought high school, college, pro, that was any better and clicked more than that '76 team?
No, there was a lot of talent on that team, a lot of young talent, and a lot of there were several older guys that were really role models for the rest of us to figure out how to play that game. I mean, Fox and Haynes in the defensive secondary were just great players. Russ Francis was the year before, but we had him. Darryl Stingley. We had a lot of talent on that team, and I remember talking to people, giving some talks back here in Kansas during the off season, and I think we started with Baltimore and played, I don't know, Pittsburgh and the Oakland Raiders in the first 3 games. And I would tell people, if we get through the first 3 games, then we might win a few. And I think we lost to Baltimore or whoever we played in the opener. We beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, and then the Raiders came to our place and we smacked them badly. And it was just a team that did a lot of things together off the field and on the field. And it was unfortunate that we had to end it the way it ended in Oakland with what I say is a bad call from the official. But it was a fun year. It was a great year, and we thought it would catapult us for more better years. We never quite got over the hump with that kind of a better year.
Now, Tim Fox, we had hit him on a couple of weeks ago, and as is Foxy, he goes out on a limb, and he says that to this day, he believes that the fix was in by the NFL. The NFL wanted the Raiders to win, and that he said there's so many things happened during that game, early in the game, calls going against us, that he believes that the NFL orchestrated that win for the Raiders to beat you guys. I know
he said that was the one and only time he's ever felt that way, right, Mike?
Yeah. Yep.
I've heard him say that before. I can't verify that. Actually, the back judge for the game was at Kansas State, my backup quarterback was his son.
Really?
And so if anybody was throwing anything, this guy wouldn't have done anything like that. I knew him a little bit because of his son. And I tried to go over and talk to him after the game just to say hi. And there was a police escorting out the officials. They wouldn't let me close to him. So, Tim has his own opinions. I couldn't say one way or the other. I doubt it, but anything's possible with the Raiders.
Yeah. It was. What is it about that franchise? I mean, go to the Darryl Stingley hit, go to the whole Al Davis thing. Just go some of the characters that they had on that team. It's like I used to have a coach at Harvard that we played one particular team. He says, I think they recruited their team out of Walpole State Prison. And that's kind of what the Raiders looked like too, did they?
Well, after we traded Don Hasselbeck out there in '82, I think it was, because of the strike, he was our player rep. He got traded to the Raiders. He had some stories to tell about their team that were just, you wouldn't believe. I can't remember all of them, but it was an interesting place to play, according to him.
Do you remember one story you could tell?
Well, they had somebody picked up. What was the linebacker? Big, long, lanky linebacker.
Hendricks, the Mad Stork.
Ted Hendricks. Al Davis had a driver pick him up and bring him to practice every day to make sure he got there. And then he would practice with, he would wear a fire helmet one day for practice. He'd wear a different kind of helmet every day, but it wasn't a football helmet. And then the driver took him home and he drank most of the night.
Wow.
So, weird guy. Great player, but a weird guy.
Not recommended for training camp purposes.
Not at all.
You know, a couple times, well, I'll get to Stingley in a minute, but I wanted to ask you, when you guys played, with the four teams in town between the Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins, and Patriots, the Patriots were number 4, pretty much.
Yep.
And that was then. Right now, they're number 1, and maybe 6 Super Bowls will do that for you. But it was fascinating the way that you guys had to fight for recognition. But the fans were very loyal. The fans that you had were very loyal, and it was an interesting dynamic between the 4 teams in Boston at that time.
Yeah, the first time I really felt appreciated about being a Patriot by the general population was when we were busing to the Logan Airport to go to play in the AFC Championship game. And driving up 95, the cars were pulling off to the side of the road. People were out of their cars waving and honking. And when we got to the airport, there were people there to send us off. It was something I'd never experienced before as a Patriot. And I think it was after we came back from that game, there were so many. We flew back into Providence. There were so many people that they had to put us on buses to drive through the crowd that had come to meet us at the Providence airport. So that's the first time I really felt like we were kind of on similar footing as the Red Sox and the Bruins and the Celtics.
No, I agree. I think that, I think Nelly had this line that the journey was more significant than the end result, the Super Bowl. That team, 3 playoff games on the road, just the type of guys you all were. Yeah.
They had some great players: Horace Ivory, Sam Cunningham, Andy Johnson. These guys were terrific. Stanley Morgan. I mean, what more could you want? And Darryl was such a great receiver. And I have to ask you this, because I think about it every time I watch the replay. You're the one that threw the ball. It was a preseason game. How many times have you thought about that? And I've been out to Chicago and interviewed Stingley and before he passed on, and I just wondered how much you felt about it, how much you carried with you, and how much you've relived that play.
Well, even when I was playing, but now when I'm watching, every time there's a player that goes down and doesn't move, I start praying for him, because I don't want it to be something like Darryl. At the same time, I probably had thrown a number of passes similar to the one I threw in the game that got him knocked out of the game and paralyzed for life. And I just, it's hard to take that kind of responsibility on yourself. I've tried to block it out as much as I can, but it does circle back every now and then.
Realistically, you had, in your heart of hearts, realistically that it wasn't your fault at all. I mean, but on the other hand, I understand.
I threw the ball.
Well, it creeps in. That's all I think about when I see that replay is how you felt about it when it really was not your responsibility or your fault. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. The ball was a little high. It was a preseason game. The hit didn't have to be made. Probably wouldn't have been made by most other safeties. But again, the ball was overthrown. And so that kind of led to the whole thing.
You beat yourself up about it.
I don't beat myself up about it. No,
Good.
I assumed God had some kind of plan for Darryl, and I know he's in a better place now.
Good. I'm glad you don't beat yourself up about it, because there's no reason why you should. I just always felt that you probably did first, knowing you.
At first, I probably did. You're right, but it's a long time ago.
A long time ago, right?
Stanley Morgan, Grogs. Where does he rank for you? Is he a Hall of Famer?
Oh, there's no question he should be in the Hall of Fame. He finally got nominated by the Old Timers Committee, but didn't make it, I don't think. For a guy to average 20 yards a catch over a 14-year, 15-year career, he was amazing. He could just run like the wind, catch about everything you throw his way, and he just doesn't get the respect that he deserves.
What did he do for your confidence level when you stepped into a huddle and you saw John Hanna? If you needed 3 yards, you'd get at least 3.5. When you needed 18 yards in a play, was there anybody else you even thought of in the huddle other than Steamer?
No, and I would ask him just like I would ask Hanna, what can you do to get me 18 yards? And he'd give me a play. I said earlier, you kind of learn to trust certain people. If I walked in the huddle and I'd say, Stanley, can you beat that corner on a in route yet? And he goes, no, not yet. I haven't set him up yet. I said, can you beat him on a corner route? Yeah, throw the corner route. I can beat him on that. So he wouldn't just say yes all the time. He would tell me no and something better if I needed it. Back in college, and for him to become such a great wide receiver was just amazing.
This is a question Mike asked previous Patriots we've had on. It just seems that more of you guys stay around New England than most of the other sports teams. Certainly, it just seems that you guys just hang around. You guys just, after your playing days are over, you guys stayed here. And I just wondered why that was.
Well, maybe because there's more of us on a team. We had 50, 55 guys on a team. Basketball only has 12 or 15, and hockey, baseball, they're less than that. But I find that those guys that were on successful teams that we had are the ones that kind of stick around, because there's a lot of opportunities in the Boston area to do a lot of different things. The guys who are on not very good teams are the guys that probably go back home and go back to their college town, and the opportunities for them are better there. But you're right. There are and have been a lot of guys that played for the Patriots that have made New England their home.
Yeah. I want to go back to one thing you were talking about, asking so-and-so in the huddle, can I get 3 yards? Can I get 18 yards? Calling your own plays. I asked Drew Bledsoe one time, I said, wouldn't you love to call your own plays? He said, are you kidding me? I do not want that responsibility. And that stunned me, that a quarterback didn't want to call all his own plays. You called all your own plays. Would have been tougher for you if you had to wait for a play to come in from the sideline or into the radio transmitter in your helmet?
I couldn't have. I don't know how they stand the radio thing in their helmet. I would have hated that. But I guess certain quarterbacks who don't want to do it probably have never tried it before. It's I had a knack. Ron Earhart let me in 79 and 80 call my own plays. Raymond Berry let me in 85, 86, all the way up until he left, the year before he left. Let me call my own plays. I had a knack for memorizing the game plan, runs and passes on first and 10, runs and passes on 5 to 9 or whatever. So I had a knack for doing that. And I also had 10 other guys in the huddle that could help me make a better decision than a coach sitting in the press box who's not really seeing the same game we're seeing down on the field.
Does anybody do that today? Does anybody actually call their own plays today?
No.
They give them the run pass option, but I think that's probably it. They call one run and one pass in the huddle, and depending on the defense, they make a call and then they throw it or give it to the running back. But I don't know of anybody that's calling all their own plays. No.
Back to the rule change thing again about run pass. They didn't have the sliding option available when you played, did they? They had to hit. They had to tackle.
You could slide. I slid once in my career. It was in Pittsburgh. It was right toward the end of the half. I slid because we were in field goal range. The defensive back didn't pull up. He hit me under the chin with his helmet. And the last thing I remember is my hands going like this to call a timeout. The next thing I knew, I was in the shower in the locker room and the only one in there. And it just drives me crazy. I know these quarterbacks slide to protect themselves, and guys have been taught to pull off. They weren't taught to pull off in our day. But when they slide a yard short of a first down and nobody's around them, I scream at my television set. It drives me crazy. Know where the line is. You go head first, they hit you on your back. It hurts less to get hit on your back than it does on your front. That's a sore subject with me.
I can understand that. That's why you were such a fan favorite, because you were gritty and gutsy, and you played hard. It brings me to the CTE question. When I've talked to Nelson about it and Fox about it, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about it. Since you just brought up the concussion thing, which obviously you suffered at that moment in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Your thoughts about the brain injuries?
Well, I'm glad they're doing things to help prevent concussions. Excuse me. It's the Boston University is doing a great study with the brains of former players, and I get all that. My mom's in a memory care facility right now, and my wife's folks were in nursing homes and memory care facilities 10 years ago. And I find it strange that if all these guys that played football as young people have CTE, why there's only about 75% of the people in nursing homes are women. The guys are all dead. And they didn't know, and the women didn't play football. They're in the memory care area. They didn't have concussions. They didn't, it's just, I don't know. I know that they're finding things with the CTE, but it's until they find something that can be diagnosed while you're still alive. I guess I don't know enough about it.
You don't ever say to yourself that from all the hits you have that you have any symptoms that you've read about, you're fine, you're convinced you are?
Yeah, there are times when I wonder if that I forgot that because of a concussion, but it could be just old age. I talk to people that didn't play football and they forget the same kind of things. So
yeah, well, I'm one of them. Okay, so
let's take it as it comes.
If our names weren't listed here, I might forget who I'm talking to. But that happens. It happens at the most inopportune times too.
Yeah, well,
in the middle of conversations, you're going to bring up something, and all of a sudden, well, what was I going to say? Why can't I remember that guy's name?
Yeah.
Or on and on.
Is that concussions or old age?
Oh, no, it's old age.
Yeah,
Old
definitely.
age. Okay.
Okay. I have one question. Let me do our commercial, Mike, and you can ask Steve this question, right?
Okay, yeah.
Bo, go ahead. You have a question? Did you have something?
No, I was going to have you.
Hang on, Steve, because Mike's got a question after this, but this is my responsibility to sell these campers at Cold Springs RV, and it's not a tough job to do at all because all you have to do is go up there and see their fantastic selection, deals, and enjoy the pressure-free environment. And when I say pressure-free environment, go up there, look around. They have a large display of pop-ups for summer camping, fall camping, foliage camping, which is now is the time to get your camper for the fall foliage that's predicted to be one of the more spectacular ones in New England this fall. A complete fall experience for you. So, and get ready for a great deal. You can learn more about Cold Springs RV on their website, coldspringsrv.com. So make it a fall to remember with a camper from Cold Springs RV, Cold Springs RV, and they're in Ware, New Hampshire. That would be west of Manchester and north of Haverhill. So go enjoy it and have a great time and find yourself a great bargain. Now, the question of the week for Steve Grogan from Mike Lynch.
All right, Grogs, we asked everybody this question. Remember, John Madden wouldn't fly, so he had a Madden cruiser, the bus that he drove all across the country.
Yep.
So we're going to give each one of the guests on our show the Cold Springs RV. We're trying to get them to build a Lobel cruiser in Bob Lobel's name. And so we're going to give each one the Lobel cruiser. You can ride. You can come to Boston, drive it to Kansas City, or we'll bring it to Kansas City, and you can drive from there to Los Angeles. But you've got to pick one person. Can be a sports figure, can be anybody you want, can be alive or dead. They'd ride shotgun with you while you drove the Lobel cruiser cross country. Somebody you'd like to cross country with and just have a conversation with. Who would it be?
Man,
Good.
that's really a tough one.
That's why we like to make it.
I think it would be my dad.
Cool.
Good answer. Cool answer.
Why?
He's just the smartest guy I've ever known, the toughest guy I've ever known. He could tell great stories, had a great life. It just would be fun to spend a trip with him.
Did he enjoy watching you play?
Yeah, I think he did. I would call after games. My mom would always answer, and occasionally she would say, I'd say, how'd Dad make it through the game? And she'd say, oh, I don't know. He went outside and mowed the lawn in the second half, or he went and raked leaves. And I couldn't figure out why that happened, because he was a football coach. He played football in college, small college. And then my son started playing at Northeastern. And I immediately knew why my dad was raking yards and mowing lawns. And I was so nervous to watch my son play, wanting him to have success, that I could hardly sit still in the stands. And that was my dad's way of releasing his nervousness, was to go outside and not watch the game in the second half. So it's kind of interesting to put that all together.
That's a great answer.
It's a great answer.
It's one of the best answers we've had.
Well, I brought up my dad. He was a K-State fan. What else could I say?
He must have been a great, great man.
Well, Steve, it's been great. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, and don't be a stranger. Come back again someday. You're the best.
Right. We'll do that.
Tell Robbie we said hi.
Yes.
We'll do that too. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate
Steve
it.
Grogan.